We continue now at the top of Daf Chavav Amud Aleph and Meseches Rosh Hashana. This is Rosh Hashana Daf 26a. The Brisa here continues Miksasan Nasu Edim Umiksasan Nasu Dayon and Divrei Rabbi Tarfon. Let's say you have a situation where the Sanhedrin sees someone commit murder, so then part of them become witnesses, and part of them will act as judges. Rashi over here says, Miksasan Nasan Edim v'yoidu b'fnei chavreim. Those who are witnesses will testify in front of their colleagues. Tegabe dina nefashos edus b'in. When it comes to dina nefashos, when it comes to capital cases, you need to have testimony. Techsiv, like the pasuk says, Al pi shnayim edim yumas hames lo yumas. Person can only be put to death by the testimony of two witnesses. Umiksasan nasan dayanim, and then the other ones will be judges. Aval hami'idim lo yeshu v'yaduna imahim. Rashi points out that people testifying can't also be judges at the same time. The point is, according to Rabbi Tarfon, somebody who could be a witness, meaning somebody who witnessed the event, is allowed to be a judge. But even Rabbi Tarfon agrees that someone who's actually testifying in court can also act as a judge. Rashi points out Rabbi Tarfon is consistent with our Mishnah, because in our Mishnah as well, when you have Eidas HaChodesh, we're not allowing someone to testify and be a judge. If that was the case, why do you have to have someone else sit there to be a judge? Let them just testify in front of the one judge, and then they'll sit and be judges and witnesses. Obviously, it can't be both. That's what it says in the second parak of Ksubas. So in other words, Rashi is just pointing out, Rabbi Tarfon and our Mishnah agree that if you're actually testifying, you can't be a judge. The issue is, if you are an aide, if you witness something, can you, instead of testifying, can you act as a judge? And Rabbi Tarfon says that is fine. And the Brisa continues, Rabbi Akiva says, no, Kula Nasan Eidim. All of them were witnesses to the event. As Rashi says, they're all fit to be witnesses. If you're fit in theory to be a witness, you can't also be a judge. And that's why the Gemara is saying this Rabbi Akiva does not seem to go like our Mishnah. In our Mishnah, when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh, we said on the contrary, if you're fit to be an aide, so still it's possible for you to be a judge in terms of Kiddush HaChodesh. And the Gemara continues, Afilu Tema Rabbi Akiva. You could even say that our Mishnah is consistent with the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. Arkan lo kama Rabbi Akiva hasam ela b'dinei nefashos. Rabbi Akiva only said over there, by dinei nefashos, by capital cases, that there's a limitation that if you're fit to be an aide, you can't be a judge. Because the pasuk says that you have to try to save, meaning we're always trying to look for a way to save the person from being killed. Since they saw him kill someone, so somebody who actually saw the murder, meaning we're talking here about the Sanhedrin that saw the person commit murder, they're not going to look for a merit for this person. They're not going to try to save the person. So therefore, we're not going to allow such a person who was an aide, who was a witness to the murder, to be a judge, because you're not going to have hitzilu ha'eda. They're not going to be able to look for a merit for this individual. But over here, when it comes to Kiddush HaChodesh, Afilu Rabbi Akiva Moda, even Rabbi Akiva would admit that, again, someone who's fit to be an aide, someone who witnessed the event, in this case, the new moon, is allowed to be a judge instead of being a witness. The Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Kol HaShofaros Kesherim. When it comes to shofar, in terms of the mitzvah of blowing shofar on Rosh Hashanah, all shofaros are kosher, chutz mishal par, except for the one that comes from a cow, mipnei shu keren, because if it comes from a cow, it's really not called a shofar, it's called a keren. Amar Rabbi Yossi says, Valo kala shofaros nikru keren, but aren't all shofars called keren? Shenemar, like the pasuk says, b'mshoch b'keren hayovel, talks about the keren hayovel, and we know that a yovel is referring to a ram, so you see that the ram's horn is called a keren as well, so why should the parah be a problem just because it's called a keren? It can also be referred to as a shofar. And Rashi over here says, Shu keren eino kare shofar, again, if it's from a parah, it's not called a shofar. V'gabe Yom HaKippurim shofar ksiv by Yom Kippur, it says the word shofar. V'avarta shofar trua, it says you're going to blow the shofar, you're going to blow a trua with the shofar. So you see, you need something that's called a shofar, and again, that's why it's not good if the horn comes from a parah. And the Gemara says, Shapir Kama Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi is arguing very well. Rabbi Yossi points out that even the one that comes from the ram, from the yovel, that's called a keren. So the fact that it's called a keren should not be a problem. The Rabbanon will respond, Kol HaShofaros ikru shofar v'ikru keren. When it comes to other shofaros, they can be referred to as both names. They can be called shofar, they can be called keren. However, the parah, when it comes from a cow, keren ikri, shofar lo ikri. That's called a keren, and it's not called a shofar, dechsiv, like the pasuk says, bechor shoro hadar lo, v'karnei re'im karnav. So you see here, it's talking about shor, and it refers to it as a keren. And Rashi over here says, v'karnei re'im karnav shel bechor shoro keren, eshkechon de'ikri. You see again, by bechor shoro, we see that it's called a keren, it's not called a shofar. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yossi Amar Lach, and Rabbi Yossi will respond to you. The paranami ikri shofar. Par is no different than everything else. It's called a keren, but it is also called shofar. Dichsiv, like the pasuk says, v'seitiv la'Hashem mishor par. Pasuk talks about a shore and a par. So what's going on in this pasuk referring to a shore and a par? Im shore lama par. If you said the word shore, why do you say par? Vim par lama shore. And if you said the word par, why are you saying shore? Elamai shore par. What does it mean shore par? Mi shofar. It actually means shofar. It's referring here to the shofar. Rashi over here explains, V'seitiv la'Hashem. Rashi here explains the pasuk is a reference to tefilasi. According to this understanding that it's shofar, the pasuk is a reference to the davening. A person's davening should be good before Hashem, mi shofar. It should be as good as the blowing of the shofar. Uveshor kam mishtoikra, and the pasuk over here is talking about a shore. So you see again a reference to shofar when it comes to shore, when it comes to par, you see this reference to shofar. And the Gemara continues, v'Rabbanan, and how do the Rabbanan understand the pasuk? K'der Rav Masna, they understand the pasuk like Rav Masna says. The Amr Rav Masna, because Rav Masna says, my shore par. What does it mean that my tefillah should be good like a shore and like a par? Again, the question is, those are two different animals. So what it means to say is as follows. Shu gadol kepar, it means that my tefillah should be mishor par, like as good as bringing an ox, which was large like a par. A par was a bigger animal than a shore, and therefore we're saying, no, my tefillah should be just like bringing a fully grown animal as a carbon. Rashi over here explains, shor shehu kepar, biyom shenikra shor hayagadol kepar, meaning even on the day when it was born, when it's still called a shore, it was as large as a par. Zeu shor shal ma'isa bereshis. That's a reference to the shore at the time of creation. Shebiyom shenivra nivra b'komas. At the time of the creation, all the animals were made fully formed. V'shor ben yomo kare shor. A shore on the first day that it's born is called a shore. Shenemar shor o kesev oez. Upare no nikra ad ben sholosh. But it's only called a par until it's 3 years old. So again, according to the Rabbanan's understanding of the pasuk means mishor that is like a par. V'seitiv la'Hashem. It should be good, my tefillah to Hashem, better than a shore, again, that you would bring as a carbon. And we're talking about a shore that was as large, that was as big as a par. And the Gemara continues, Ula Omar Ula says, Hainu taima de Rabbanan. No, the real reason of the Rabbanan, why you can't use the horn of a cow for a shofar, is Kidder Rav Chisda. The real reason is like Rav Chisda says. The Omar Rav Chisda, because Rav Chisda says, Mimnei mayin kohen gadol, nichnas bebigdei zav, lifnai v'lifnim, la'avod avoda. How come the kohen gadol in Yom Kippur, how come he doesn't enter in the golden garments to do the avoda? And the reason is, Lafishain Kategor Nasa Sanegor. The reason is because the prosecutor cannot be the defender. So over here, when we're talking about the Egel Hazav, it was made out of gold, so you shouldn't enter in gold in the Kodesh Kadashim, because the Egel Hazav is the prosecution, so to speak. And so the Kohen Gadol, when he's going to defend Klal Yisrael, shouldn't enter with the golden begadim. And so the same thing is true over here. The Egel Hazav was a par, it was a kind of a bull, a kind of a cow. And therefore we don't take that, we don't take a para, and we don't take the horn of a para in order to use it as a shofar to defend Klal Yisrael. But the Gemara continues, v'lo, but is that really true? Do we never use the cow, do we never use the prosecution, so to speak, as a defendant? Va'ika dam par, but isn't there the dam of the par? Sometimes we use the blood of a par when we bring a carbon, and again, that's meant as a defense, so to speak, of Klal Yisrael. And so the Gemara says, no, hov ishtani. That's different because now it's changed, it's the blood, it's no longer the cow. Once it's changed, it's considered a different item. So the Gemara says, 1 second, v'yiko aron v'kapores uchruv. But these items in the Beis HaMikdash are made out of gold. The aron and the kapores and the kruvim, they're made out of gold. So how are we allowed to use those? And so the Gemara says, chote bal yakriv kamrin. And all we mean to say is that the person who's the sinner shouldn't bring it. Rashi over here says, chote bal yakriv ha'adam lo yakrivenu halom shu chotabo. The person who sinned, he shouldn't bring these things. But the fact that there's an aron, a kaporos, and kruvim in the Beis HaMikdash, that's not a problem. But the Gemara continues, Vayika kafu machta. But what about the kaf and machta? Those are things that are actually brought when you're doing the avoda, so that should be a problem. And to that the Gemara says, Chote bal yisnoa kamrinan. So that's only a problem if you're actually making yourself, if you're beautifying yourself, as Rashi over here says, Chote bal yisnoa le'eskashet bo bekir bo halom. So to adorn yourself with gold, that would be a problem. That's why Big Day Zav is a problem, but it's not a problem just to bring the kaf and the machta. But the Gemara says, 1 second, Vayika Big Day Zav mi bachutz. But what about the fact that the Kohen is wearing the golden garments outside of the Kodesh Kadashim? So that should also be a problem. And so to that, the Gemara says, no, mi bifnim klamrin. And the only problem is when you're taking it into the Beis HaMikdash. But if it's outside of the Beis HaMikdash, it's not going to be a problem. But the Gemara says, shofar nami mi bachutzu. But isn't the shofar also outside of the Beis HaMikdash? So why is the shofar a problem? Back to square one. Even though the shofar is a prosecutor, so to speak, it shouldn't be a problem. Gemara says, no, kevan de zikaron hu kibifnim dami. Since it's for zikaron purposes, so therefore it's considered like you're bifnim, it's considered like you're within the Beis HaMikdash. Rashi over here says, kevan de zikaron ka'asi kilifnim dami. Shofar nami afagav de lesbe misham chote bal yakriv, velesbe misham chote bal yisna. You're right. The shofar is not an issue of bringing a carbon. It's not an issue of getting hana, of getting benefits. But kevan de zikaron ka'asi kivigde kohen gadol shalifnim dami. Since it's again, it's made for a remembrance, so to speak, at the time of judgment, a remembrance of our deeds. Therefore, it's like you're entering lifnim, and it's going to be a problem. But the Gemara continues, how could you say the reason why the shofar from the par is a problem is because ein kategor nasa sanegor, but wasn't it taught mimneshu karen kamer? It says straight out the reason is because it's called a karen and not called a shofar. And to that the Gemara says chadav yod kamer. That's one reason, and there's an additional reason. There's actually two reasons. Chadav ein kategor nasa sanegor. Number one, you can't have the prosecutor be the defender. V'yod mimneshu karen. And the other reason is because it's called a karen. Rabbi Yossi Amar Lach. Now what will Rabbi Yossi respond to you? The ka'amr ein kategor nasa sanegor. That which you say, this problem that the prosecutor can't be the defender. Hani mili mi bifnim. Again, that's only a problem when it's mi bifnim. If you're in the Kodesh Kadashim, that's a problem. V'hai shofar mi bachutzu. When we're talking about shofar, that's already outside the Kodesh Kadashim. It's not a problem. With the ka'amrim imneshu karen, and the fact that you're saying it's called a karen and not a shofar, again, like Rabbi Yossi said, kala shofaros nam yikru karen. All shofaros are called karen, so that's not an issue. And the Gemara continues, Abaya Amar Abaya says, Hainu taimayu de Rabbanan. The real reason of the Rabbanan, why it's a problem to use the shofar again of a para, is because shofar Amar Achmana. The pasuk says shofar in singular, v'lo shnayim ushlosha shofar. So you can't have it 2 or 3 shofaras. V'had de para, when it comes to the horn of a cow, kevan takoi gildi, since the horn of a cow is made of layers, mischaze kishnayim ushlosha shofaras. It looks like 2 or 3 shofaras, and that's the actual problem. Gemara says, V'atanim imneshu karen. Again, the same question. Doesn't it say in the Mishnah that the real problem is that it's called a karen and not a shofar? Ka'amar, that's what it says in the Mishnah. And so the Gemara says, Chada v'yod ka'amar. Again, it's one reason and there's an additional reason. Chada, the shofar, echad amar achmana. Number one, it says one shofar. V'lo shnayim u'shlosha shofaros. Not 2 or 3 shofaros. And that's why it's a problem, because again, this is layers. V'yod imneshu karen. And additionally, there's a problem because it's really called a karen when it comes from a para. It's not called a shofar. Rabbi Yossi Amar Lach, and Rabbi Yossi will say to you, the Kohamrit shofar echad amar achmana v'lo shnayim u'shlosha shofaros. Your argument that you're saying that it says one shofar, not 2 or 3 shofaros, kevan the mechabri ahadadi, since it's all attached to each other, it's all one thing. So chadu, it's all one, even though it's layers, but at the end of the day, it's all one item. With the Kohamrit mivneshu karen, and again, your argument that it's called a karen, kala shofaros nami yikru karen, all shofaros are also called karen, that's not a problem. And the Gemara continues, my mashma de hayovla lishna de dichru. How do we know that the word yovel refers to the ram? In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yossi says that when the pasuk says keren hayovel, it's referring to the ram's horn, and you see that a shofar is called a keren as well, because of course the ram's horn is called a shofar, and it's also called a keren. But how do we know that the word yovel refers to a ram? And so the Gemara says, the Tanya, as we learned in a brayso, so Amar Rabbi Akiva says, Keshalachti la'arvia, when I went to Arabia, hayukorin l'dichra yovel, that's exactly what they called the ram. They called the ram the yovel. V'yamar Rabbi Akiva, and the Gemara continues, Rabbi Akiva says, Keshalachti l'galia, when I went to Galia, hayukorin l'nida galmuda. They called a nida, they called her a galmuda. My galmuda, what is this language of galmuda? So gemula dami bal, it means to say that this woman is separated from her husband because she's a nida, because she's menstruating, so therefore she's separated from her husband. And the Gemara continues, V'yamar Rabbi Akiva, and Rabbi Akiva says, Keshalachti l'Afriki, when I went to Africa, hayukorin l'ma ksita. They call them ma, which is a kind of a coin. They refer to it as a ksita. L'may nafkamina, what difference does that make? Lefrushe meya ksita do raisa. The pasuk uses the term meya ksita. Now we know what is meya ksita. It means meya danki. It means meya ma'a. Danki is the same thing as this coin of ma'a. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rebbe says, Keshalachti l'krache ayam, when I went far away over the seas, hayukorin l'mechira kira. They would refer to the word mechira, meaning a sale. They would call that kira. L'may nafkamina, what difference does that make? Lefrushe asher karisili. Also, to explain a pasuk, it says asher karisili. We know that it's referring to a purchase in that pasuk. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says, Kashalachti l'tchum kan nishraya. When I went to the border of the area of kan nishraya, hayukorin lekala ninfi. They refer to a kala, a bride, as a ninfi. Well, the tarnagol, and they refer to a rooster as a sechvi, So lekala ninfi mikra. Where do we see a pasuk that you refer to a kala as a ninfi? The pasuk says yefei nof misos kol haaretz. The pasuk here is talking about beauty refers here now to the beauty of the kala. So Yefei Nof sounds like Ninfi. That's a reference to the kala. Well, the Tarnagol Sechvi, and what about the issue of a rooster being called Sechvi? Amar Rav Yudah Amar Rav. Rav Yudah says in the name of Rav. If you want, some people say it's Rav Yoshua ben Levi. Some people say Rav Yoshua ben Levi says, "My kra." What is the pasuk that the rooster is called a sechvi? The pasuk says, "Mi shas betuchos chachma o minasan la sechvi vina." First part of the pasuk is talking about the wisdom that comes from inside of a person or from inside the body, and then it talks about the understanding of a sechvi. So mishas betuchos chachma elu kloyos. The first part of the pasuk, the Gemara says, refers to the kidneys. The kidneys are said to bestow wisdom. O minasan la sechvi vina. And what's the second part of the pasuk? The sechvi has understanding. It's that tarnagol that refers to the rooster that knows when to crow at various times during the night. And the Gemara continues, Levi ikla lo asra. Levi went to a particular place. Asa gavra lekame, a person came in front of him. Amar le, said to him, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chavav Amud Beis.